Hey guys, today I'm going to talk to you about one of my favorite fishing techniques, and that's fishing a swim jig. But I'm going to dive so deep into the fishing a swim jig that you're going to definitely learn something from this video. In the meantime, hit that subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner. It would mean a lot to me. Thank you all for anybody that's already subscribed to my channel, and I hope you learned something from this video. So let's just go ahead and dive right on into it. In my opinion, there's two different types of swim jigs. There's heavy cover swim jigs and there's light wire swim jigs. And that's how I break it down. I truly break it down based off of the type of cover I'm fishing and the type of line that I'm fishing. So in this case, the first one I'm gonna show you is the heavy cover swim jig. This is a Strike King Greg Hackney heavy cover swim jig. This is the situation when I'm using a heavy wire hook and braided fishing line. I know that seems super basic, but I will explain more onto why I use this. So first off, I throw just about one size head when it comes to heavy cover swim jig, and that is a 1/4 of an ounce. The 1/4 ounce swim jig with braid is the one that I turn to 9 times out of 10. So the whole reasoning behind using that 1/4 ounce is I like to keep it very high in the water column, within that first 6 inches of water. I want that thing swimming through the water and looking just like a bluegill. So I get a lot of questions onto why would you fish just a 1/4 ounce when there's 3/8, half ounce, even 3/4 ounce swim jigs? Well, I'm going to explain to you like this. When I'm fishing this heavy cover swim jig, I want a very compact bait, a small trailer, something that is going to be small, those fish can target and eat. So the way I see it, and it might be wrong, the way I see it is when a fish is looking up at a swim jig, especially when swimming high in the water column, if it's too big, bulky, and unrealistic, they're not going to eat it. But if it is compact, looks realistic, that's when they eat it. And that 1/4 ounce helps keep that bait high in the water, but you can fish it really slow. And that's a big key. So as you can see here, I have a Swimming Caffeine Shad Junior, which is the smaller one, on this swim jig. And I won't ever go to the big one when I'm fishing that swim jig high. The other trailer I'll use on this is a Strike King Rage Craw, and I'll match the color to whatever jig color I'm using. And I only use 4 jig colors when I'm swimming a jig high. I'll either use green pumpkin, bluegill, black and blue, or white. And I will match the trailer accordingly. So on green pumpkin, I'll either use a Swimming Caffeine Shad or the Rage Craw. If I'm fishing the black and blue, I'll only fish a Rage Craw or a Strike King Menace. If I'm fishing the bluegill, I'll kind of mix it up. And white, I only fish a Swimming Caffeine Shad Junior. I think that's extremely important, is to match the profile of the trailer to the color of the bait that you're fishing. In this case, I'm trying to imitate a bluegill so it looks like a bluegill and it's still very compact. So the whole idea behind fishing it on braid, though, is when those fish come up there and they eat it, just like they're trying to kill it. They're eating it hard. They're in the middle of cover, in the middle of lily pads, Kissimmee grass, hay grass, wherever you're throwing this thing. I'm throwing it right up in the middle of stuff. And that's where that braided line comes in play. I throw anything between 30 and 50 pound Strike King tour grade braid, green in color. Keep it basic on color. Just I throw green. I don't know if it really even matters because you're moving the bait fast enough that I don't know if the fish could see it even to begin with. But I think, in my opinion, the rod selection when it comes to fishing a swim jig high is as important as anything in the world. So I've done it for a long time, and it actually took me a long time to figure out exactly what rod I like on this. But I've kind of landed on one specific rod, model, and style. So this is the Team Lou's ledge rod. The ledge rod is made for fishing out deep. It was designed by Mark Rose, and this particular model is called the hair jig rod. The hair jig rod is made for fishing hair jigs out in deep water. However, what I have learned is the hair jig rod has a lot of tip to it, and that's what you need, and a ton of backbone. So when I hook one up with that 30 to 50 pound braid, I'm getting them in the boat. I'm fishing on a 7.5 to 1 gear ratio reel. This one happens to be a HyperMag. It's just my go-to standard reel for heavy cover and just any fishing situation. It catches fish, puts them in the boat for me. But I want to explain to you exactly how I fish this swim jig. And I think it'll make more sense onto why I picked this rod when you see me fish it. So right here, I'm gonna make a cast just like so, and I'm gonna keep that jig high, and I'm shaking the rod tip the whole time. And at the entire time, I'm actually reeling the reel, so I'm picking up the slack the whole time. So I'm keeping the jig high, and it's even waking in some sense. But this is a bait that you can visually watch coming through the water, and you'll know if a fish eats it. But that's what's so important with that tip. Having that tip so loose is that you can actually shake that bait and make that skirt flare up in the water, and that's what triggers those big bass into eating. It's the most spectacular strike sometimes. They'll come up and they'll knock it out of the water. I mean, they'll hit it so hard that you don't even think they got it in their mouth, but they do. This is actually one of the techniques that one of the best swim jig fishermen that I know, Bill Lowen, this is exactly how he fishes it. And I mean, he's a great swim jig fisherman. He catches a lot of big bass on it, but he fishes a 1/4 ounce all the time, and so do I. You know, I feel like imitation is the best form of flattery in the sport, and Bill Lowen fishes a 1/4 for a reason. Keeps that swim jig high. He can visually see the strike. He can pump that swim jig through the water, and that's when they eat it. So there is a swim jig technique, however, that is the polar opposite of fishing it like this. And it's one that I learned on the Mississippi River up around La Crosse. So this particular technique involves fishing a light wire swim jig, more compact jig, a smaller trailer, and lighter fluorocarbon line. One guy that has done this for years and has made, I don't even know how much money, it's just a ridiculous amount of money, is Tom Monsour. Tom Monsour fishes a swim jig on fluorocarbon, anywhere between a 1/4 to 3/8, even a 1/2 ounce. I know of him fishing a 1/2 ounce sometimes. And fishing on a little bit lighter action rods, like a 7-foot medium heavy. In this case, this is just a Finesse jig rod, something that has a little bit of tip, but some backbone to it. So I pick 3 different swim jigs. So, and a couple of them aren't Strike King, and I'll tell you straight up, there's some that I use that are light wire swim jigs that are not Strike King swim jigs. This one is one of those. This is a Humdinger Swim Jig. I'll fish, there's one that's custom made around Mississippi River that I like, and it's a really good one as well. I don't even remember the name of it, but I got a bunch of them, and they're really good. I mean, the wire on it, though, is so thin. The other one I fish is actually one of the very first swim jigs that Strike King ever made, and that's the tour grade swim jig. It just has a light wire hook. It's not made for braid. I'm going to tell you right now, if you fish braid on it, you're going to straighten the hook out. It's not made for that. So basically what I do is I get this Finesse style swim jig. I'll cut a little bit of the skirt off. I want to really make that skirt inconsistent. I'm cutting that skirt off. I want to make this jig super compact, okay? And I only fish 2 trailers when I'm fishing this Finesse swim jig. I'll either fish a baby Rage Craw, like so, or I'll fish a Rage chunk, a regular Rage chunk. And this allows that bait to stay super compact and not have so much paddle to it that it scares the fish off or seems unrealistic. So basically, I'm fishing this thing on 15-pound Strike King tour grade fluorocarbon, 7.5 to 1 gear ratio reel, like that Finesse jig rod. And this is the part that you're going to be like, oh, okay, really? Okay. So basically, all I do when I'm fishing this thing is I'll throw it out there, and I'm just going to reel it slow. I mean slow. And every once in a while, I'll twitch the rod, but it's nothing in comparison to what I do when I'm fishing that heavy cover swim jig. When they eat this thing, they're going to bite it 3 different ways. They're either going to load up on it. It's just going to get heavy. It's going to feel like you're rolling a rock through the water. Your line's just going to go sideways or go slack. Or they're going to knock the fire out of it. And honestly, I've seen it all 3 ways. And you got to be, this is one of those techniques that you got to be ready at all times. Actually, and in fact, and I probably shouldn't even tell you about this, but this is just one of those things. One of the things that I know Tom Monsour, some of these great light wire swim jig guys do, is they'll actually remove their weed guard. That's right. They take the weed guard away. They'll cut it off completely. So all it'll be is basically a head, your skirt, and your trailer. And that's it, no weed guard. So then all they got to do is load into it. So then they can even go to 10, 12 pound test fluorocarbon, and they don't jeopardize the hook set. They don't have to sit there and hit them hard. They just kind of pull into them and they've got them. In my opinion, and I'm not saying my opinion's the one and only out there and that's just the way it is, but in my opinion, fishing a swim jig through the water looks more realistic than just throwing a single swim bait on a jig head. I don't know why. To me, it gives that profile, that front end profile of a bait fish or a perch, and the back end just has a little bit of kicking action, or even if it's a paddle tail, it looks just like the fish's tail. I truly think that when you start talking about profile, and I'm just talking profile, the swim jig gives a better profile than fishing a single swim bait. Situations where I fish the light wire swim jig. So in polar opposites, the heavy cover swim jig, I'm fishing it up in pads, up in cover, up around trees, up around grass. This one I'm fishing around submerged vegetation, even if I'm on Sam Rayburn, Toledo Bend, where there's hydrilla. I will actually take this swim jig, a 3/8 ounce white one, and will go to a swim bait. I'll throw a swimming caffeine shad on there, but only 15 pound fluorocarbon, and I'll reel it slow like you would like a rattle trap, a red-eyed shad, a thunder cricket, anywhere you'd fish out down in the cover, and I'll fish that swim jig and make it sink down in there and fish it. And you would be surprised how many fish that you catch by allowing that swim jig to fall down in that cover, that grass and places like that, and reel it really slow, and how many fish you're going to catch. And other situations I like to do, I actually like to fish around rock. Places like Hartwell, Lanier are some of the very best places to fish a swim jig, and that's when you actually downsize your line, take that weed guard off completely, just take the weed guard off, fish it on 10, 12 pound tests, and all you're doing is you're basically going down the bank, rock banks now, clay banks, something like that. Right now is the time to do it too. And you're just reeling that thing down those rock banks, and a lot of times you're making contact with the bottom even, and that to me is even better. And that's when I'll actually mix up my color. Sometimes I'll go to like a black and blue. If I feel like they're eating shad, I'll go to a shad color. But man, the possibilities are endless with these swim jigs. You can fish them high, you can fish them down, and everywhere in between. I hope everything that I helped you with today will help you catch more fish on a swim jig the next time you're on the water. I know after years of experimenting with these techniques, these are the ways that I like to fish them, and I hope you can incorporate these swim jig tactics into your fishing game.